Some prisoners served 10 years inside Azkaban. Some served 20. Sirius Black served 12. Barty Crouch Jr. served just under 2 before his extraction. But what does a year inside Azkaban actually mean for a human being? Because we need to be precise about what Azkaban is. It is not a prison in the conventional sense. It does not use walls as its primary containment mechanism. It does not rely on locked doors, magical restraints, or armed guards. Its primary security system is biological, a colony of soul-extracting creatures called Dementors, whose feeding process is not incidental to the imprisonment. It is the imprisonment. The psychological destruction is the point. Now, I know a lot of fans have a problem with this. The argument goes like this. No functioning government, even a corrupt one, would engineer a prison this deliberately and comprehensively destructive. It is too cruel, too systematic. It breaks the internal logic of the wizarding world, because it makes the Ministry of Magic look less like a flawed bureaucracy and more like an authoritarian torture state. And if that's what it is, why does everyone in the books just accept it? And it's a fair criticism. I'm not dismissing it. However, I'd like to throw my hat into the ring and say that governments absolutely have designed prisons around deliberate psychological destruction, maintained full legal deniability while doing it, and faced almost no meaningful public resistance. This isn't dark fantasy. It's documented history. We'll get to that. First, let's actually answer the question. How did they survive? Azkaban Fortress. North Sea location. Precise coordinates unknown. The island does not appear on Muggle maps and is subject to a Fidelius-adjacent concealment. The fortress itself is described as a towering black structure, rising from a rock in the middle of the ocean. No confirmed floor count. No confirmed cell capacity from canon, though it housed the full population of Death Eaters convicted after Voldemort's first fall. At minimum, several dozen high-security inmates, as well as a general population of lesser criminals stretching back decades. It's the only wizarding detention facility in recorded history where the security system actively feeds on the psychological state of the people it is containing. This is where it gets important. The Ministry did not arrive at Dementors by accident. They made a deliberate institutional choice. Dementors do not require wages. They do not require training, housing, scheduling, or welfare provisions. They do not go home at the end of a shift. They do not need to be managed, motivated, or supervised. They are, from a bureaucratic standpoint, a zero-cost perpetual security solution, provided you are willing to accept that your prison will function as a continuous psychological torture facility as a side effect. The Ministry was willing to accept that. Call this what it is: despair architecture. The deliberate engineering of an environment where suffering is not a flaw in the system. It is the system's primary output. The containment is almost secondary. What Azkaban actually produces, institutionally, is broken people. And a ministry that needs the wizarding public to fear certain kinds of crime benefits from that product enormously. Here's what we actually know about the physical conditions. Cells made of stone. No confirmed dimensions, but cross-referencing Harry's vision in Prisoner of Azkaban and Sirius's account to Harry in Order of the Phoenix, we can establish the following. Single occupancy, minimal light, no meaningful separation from the Dementor presence in the corridors. The cells were not sealed against the Dementors. They couldn't be. Sealed cells would eliminate the primary security mechanism. Food was delivered. This is confirmed. Sirius states he was fed, quote, enough to keep him alive, end quote. The phrasing is deliberate. The Ministry was not trying to starve prisoners. Starvation would be a different, more legally legible form of cruelty. Instead, the food provision gave the Ministry a clean institutional defense. Hey, we fed them. We provided for their basic physical needs. Whatever happened to their minds was the natural consequence of their proximity to the creatures, not our policy. Interestingly, there are no confirmed Ministry staff assigned to permanent Azkaban duty in canon. This is a gap we'll return to. The fortress is designed to destroy will. It is exceptionally good at that. What it is not designed to handle is a prisoner who either has an alternative psychological state available to them or who retains enough functional will to physically leave, because the physical containment is minimal. The ocean provides the real barrier for a broken, wandless wizard, But a wizard who is not broken, or not fully broken, is a different problem. Sirius Black escaped in 1993. Barty Crouch Jr. was extracted in approximately 1982. Both cases expose the same gap. Despair architecture assumes total psychological incapacitation. The moment that assumption fails, the prison fails. Now for a question almost nobody asks. Who actually managed and ran the prison? Azkaban ran for centuries. It processed inmates. It delivered food. Someone coordinated the Fidelius concealment. Someone maintained the building. Someone, at some administrative level, was responsible for the ongoing operation of that fortress. Who were they? Canon gives us almost nothing, but the logic of the institution demands an answer. At minimum, there had to be a warden or administrative head who reported to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, logistics personnel responsible for food delivery, which, given the location, required either port keys, apparition, or broomstick access in North Sea conditions, regularly. Even maintenance staff is required for a stone fortress on a rock in the ocean, which would require constant upkeep against weathering and structural decay. And here's the question that should bother you. What happened to those people? A Dementor does not distinguish between prisoner and employee. Proximity to a Dementor colony produces the same effect regardless of your employment status. Ministry staff assigned to Azkaban would have been subjected to sustained Dementor exposure as a condition of their job. The Ministry knew this. They did it anyway, which tells you something very specific about how the Ministry valued certain categories of its own workforce. 3 people survived Azkaban with enough functional psychology to be dangerous after release. Sirius Black, Bellatrix Lestrange, and Barty Crouch Jr. Each one survived via a different mechanism, and the mechanisms are consistent enough that they constitute a rule. Sirius served 12 years. He did not go fully insane. His explanation to Harry is the most technically precise piece of Azkaban analysis in the entire series. In his dog form, he experienced something simpler. Not happiness. Dementors feed on happiness, and an animagus doesn't suppress emotion, it changes the register of that emotion. A dog's mind processes experience differently. The Dementors couldn't get a full grip. This is not a plot convenience. This is Rowling identifying a specific vulnerability in the Despair architecture system. It is calibrated for human psychology. A fundamentally non-human cognitive state partially evades it. Sirius also had one other thing, a fixed point of focus, the knowledge that he was innocent. He describes this feeling like a fact, rather than a happy thought, something the Dementors couldn't consume because it wasn't rooted in positive emotion. It was rooted in something colder, anger, certainty. Neither of those are happiness. Neither of those are edible. Bellatrix served approximately 14 years, from 1981 to 1996. She emerged functional, dangerous, and by most observable metrics, more devoted to Voldemort than when she entered. The mechanism here is different from Sirius's. Bellatrix did not have a neutral cognitive state to retreat into. What she had was a singular, consuming obsession, her loyalty to Voldemort, that functioned as a psychological anchor so total that the Dementor's feeding process may have been unable to fully dislodge it. You cannot consume despair from someone who has replaced every other emotional register with a single, unwavering devotion. There is also a non-trivial possibility that Bellatrix did not experience the Dementor effect as purely negative. The destruction of normal emotional processing, the suppression of joy, hope, connection, may have been, for a psychology already structured around fanaticism and contempt for ordinary emotional life, less catastrophic than it would be for a normal person. Crouch Jr.'s case is different, because he did not serve his full sentence. He was extracted after approximately 2 years, via his mother's sacrifice, a polyjuice substitution that traded his life for hers. He emerged damaged, but functional. Functional enough to spend 13 years concealed in his father's house. Functional enough to subsequently infiltrate Hogwarts for a full academic year and execute a complex multi-stage plan. The interesting question is not how he survived 2 years. The interesting question is what those 2 years did to him, and whether his subsequent behavior, the absolute totality of his devotion to Voldemort, the absence of any apparent self-preservation instinct, was shaped by the Azkaban experience rather than pre-existing it. 2 years of Dementor exposure does not leave a person intact. What it may have done is stripped away every psychological layer except the deepest, most foundational one. For Crouch Jr., that layer was Voldemort. Across all three cases, the same pattern holds. Survival required a psychological anchor that was either not rooted in positive emotion or not fully accessible to human-calibrated Dementor feeding. Rage, obsession, ideological devotion, and cognitive state alteration are all partial defenses. Ordinary hope and ordinary happiness are not. This is the design flaw Azkaban's architects did not fully account for. They built a system optimized to destroy normal people. Abnormal people, people whose psychological architecture had already been restructured by trauma, obsession, or magic, were partially outside its parameters. The Ministry of Magic is not stupid. It is not cartoonishly evil. It is a deeply self-interested bureaucracy staffed by people who, individually, are mostly trying to do their jobs and protect their positions. So why Dementors? The cost argument is the cleanest. Conventional imprisonment, physical infrastructure, trained staff, magical containment systems, ongoing maintenance, is expensive. Dementors cost nothing. They already exist. They are already congregated on the island. The Ministry didn't build Azkaban's security system. They inherited it, formalized it, and made it policy. The path of least resistance was to call it a prison and build the administrative apparatus around creatures that were already there. The deniability argument is the most important one. When Amnesty International investigates a conventional prison and finds evidence of systematic psychological abuse, sensory deprivation, isolation, deliberate trauma induction, there is a paper trail. There are policies. There are orders. There is institutional culpability. Azkaban has none of that. The Ministry's position is technically clean. We house inmates in a facility that is guarded by naturally occurring magical creatures. We provide food. We do not instruct the Dementors to harm anyone. The psychological deterioration of prisoners is an environmental condition, not a policy outcome. This is a defense that has been used by real governments. We'll come back to this. The deterrence argument is most politically useful. The wizarding world is small. It has a population in the thousands in Britain, not the millions. Criminal defense in a small, close-knit community operates differently. Azkaban's reputation, the specific named horror of what happens there, functions as a deterrent signal that a conventional prison simply could not replicate. Everyone in Wizarding Britain knows what Azkaban does to people. They've seen what comes back. That knowledge is doing active institutional work for the Ministry every day, without any additional expenditure. Fudge's deployment of Dementors as enforcers in Prisoner of Azkaban is not an aberration. It is the logical extension of an already established institutional position. Dementors are tools of the state. Azkaban is where that logic lives permanently. The Quidditch World Cup and the attack on Harry are just the mobile version of that same policy. And if you want to go even deeper into the Wizarding world's darkest institutions, the families that built them, funded them, and kept them running for generations, I did a full breakdown of the Harry Potter family trees. Old money, blood purity obsession, and some connections that Rowling never made explicit. Links on screen.